Hey everyone, so welcome to Feelings with the Geekiary. We have a special guest with us tonight. He is author Isaac Marion. You might know him because he's the one who ended up creating the very enjoyable book called Warm Bodies, which ended up also getting a live action adaptation. So his new book in the Warm Body series, The Living, is nearing its release. That will be on November 13th, Isaac, I guess. November 13th, that's the release date. So yeah, so we have Isaac here and we're going to go over some questions. So Isaac, yeah, first question. Where did the inspiration for Warm Bodies come from?
Well, it was basically my life. I wrote that about, almost 10 years ago. And at the time, I was kind of in my early 20s and I was really struggling to figure out what I was doing and who I was, and just kind of was sort of sinking into this long-term depression that kind of left me feeling kind of disconnected from everything. It was very I was feeling kind of disconnected from everything. I didn't really have any sense of purpose in my life, and I wanted to write something about that, but I didn't really know what a story would be. I didn't want to just write a book about being sad and that wouldn't be very fun. And it just kind of connected to me at one point. I don't know what triggered it, but the whole zombie mythology. Everyone kind of knows what zombies are, what they're like, kind of what their behavior is. But I'd never really seen anything kind of explore what that's like inside, what it feels like to be one. And I started writing a short story with that idea of just what does it feel like to be a zombie. And then I quickly realized oh, it feels like me. It feels like what I'm experiencing here. And so I should dig into this deeper and try to tell my story in the form of this very out there science fiction premise.
I mean, it was kind of new because I have been reading a lot and I've watched movies, I guess everyone has. But when Warm Bodies came out, I was like, wow, this is a very different, unique take on zombies.
Yeah, I'm actually very surprised and confused that hadn't been done already. When I was writing the book, I assumed that there was a lot of stuff out there that kind of had that idea, and I was just I'll just put my spin on it. And then as I worked more on it, I was well, that really hasn't been done yet. 30 something years of zombie fiction, and no one's curious what the zombies are thinking. It's
yeah.
I mean, there's been a lot of zombie movies, even classic George Romero ones, where they're clearly described as thinking, they even speak and they have motivations and stuff, but we never really dig into that. So strange.
Okay, so next question. So you're releasing The Living yourself. Would you like to share what happened and why you decided to take such a book release route? How has the fan response been like?
Yeah, it was a very complicated, long journey of frustration and disappointment, I guess, from going from that point of kind of everything going well and selling a lot of books and having a solid infrastructure to suddenly very, very abruptly it went from my previous book sold hundreds of thousands of copies. I was New York Times bestseller, and then the next one just totally cold, no response. I don't know exactly what happened. There's a lot of theories from me and my agent and other people what may have gone wrong, what publisher might have done wrong, whatever it was. But for some reason, that second book just did not sell, even though it had positive reviews. It was well regarded, but it just people weren't aware of it, and it didn't really get any media attention. So basically, the publisher who did the first three books, the novella and the sequel, didn't want to do The Living because they were just they look at the numbers and it wasn't profitable, so we don't want to do the next one. And that's end of story. So suddenly I didn't have a publisher, and I had to figure out, I assumed that there would be other publishers because this publisher was a pretty large, very commercial publisher that's used to, selling a certain amount of copies. It has to be books that are very kind of broad appeal. And so I thought, there'll be smaller publishers that will know how to fix this. Like clearly something's gone horribly wrong. If the first one sells 350,000 copies, the second one sells 5,000, like there's something, there's a disconnect here. There's something there's a glitch, you know, and so someone will know how to fix it. And toured around kind of trying to find another publisher, and was surprised to find out that most of them just didn't want to get involved. Basically, they didn't want to take any risks of taking on a series that had some stumbles, and they were just like, we can't do the last book in the series if the previous one didn't sell well. And that was kind of end of story again. So it kind of reached this point where I could have kept going, like there could have gone down the ladder a little bit, looked for even smaller publishers, and like found someone who would have done it. And I had a couple offers from like very small houses, but it was just kind of like, I feel like they're not really offering me anything that I can't do just as well or better myself. And so it just got to this point where I was like, do I keep pushing this? Do I keep begging around the you know, looking for someone to kind of pity publish me, or do I just do it? Because there was still, you know, even though it was a much reduced fan base, there's still a lot of people who were waiting for the end of the story, and like they knew that it was coming. They knew I'd written it already. I'd been talking about it, and I just didn't want to keep waiting around. So I just kind of decided I'm just going to do this, and we'll see what happens in the future. It would still, you know, be great if somebody came along with the resources to kind of spread it to a wider audience. But for now, I'm just like, I'm going to publish to the fans. Basically, the people that have stuck with me throughout this are going to get it as soon as I can get it to them, and then who knows what will happen in the future. But I just decided, like, I want it to be out there. I want it to be done. I want the end of the story to exist so that I can, like, you know, share that with the readers and have some resolution. And so I just decided to kind of plunge into it. I'm just doing it very old school, printing 3,000 copies and selling them on my website. And I have like a few resources that I didn't have when I, you know, self-published Warm Bodies, which is sort of how it all started. Very, very limited self-publishing. But I'm definitely in a better place now than then. And it's possible that I could do well self-publishing, but I'm kind of thinking of it more of just like, I don't care. I just want the story to be done. I want it to be out there. And fans have been really supportive of it. I was pleasantly surprised, because for myself, when I'm announcing this, I couldn't really decide, like, is this an admission of failure? Like, am I sort of giving up and you know, just dumping it out there? Or is it like, am I starting a new chapter in my career? Is it a positive thing? And it seems like most of the readers saw it that way. They were excited that I was doing it. They seemed to kind of respect the decision to just go independent and do it myself, rather than continuing to slog through this sort of circus of trying to find publishers to, you know, take pity on me or pay favor to me. And I'm just like, I was very happy that people saw it that way, because I'm like, okay, I can feel good about this. It's not a surrender. It's just a change of approach.
I mean, I have seen some fan reactions, and they are happy that you are at least concluding the story, that they get to read the final book. I mean, I also have a question. Like, Warm Bodies, the film, came out back in 2013. And it did quite well. Like, according to Wikipedia, the reported budget was 35 million. It ended up making more than 100 million in the worldwide box office. So even though you couldn't find a publisher for the second book and going forward, like for the final book, the third book, didn't like a studio approach you that they want to like buy the screenplay from you so that they can at least continue the story as a series of films?
Yeah, I mean, the studio is still there. They're still involved, and it's been kind of this very protracted process. I mean, shortly after I put out the next book, they approached me about it and, like, you know, started doing negotiations about a potential future film, and, you know, got fairly deep into the process, but it keeps hitting mysterious obstacles. I don't really know what actually happens, but it'll get to the point of, like, there's a contract and they're about to send it to me, and then I don't hear from them for months, and then I find out later, like, oh, this fell through, or like this person dropped out, or something happened, and so we're trying this thing. So, like, stuff is still kind of bubbling in the background, but it's so slow, and it's so uncertain. And there's no way to predict, which way the wind's going to blow, like the studio's budget, the talent they can get on board, what all the different things that can go wrong in that process. So even though kind of in the back of my mind, I'm still holding out hope that something will happen with that, because it seems like it should. I mean, yeah, the movie made a lot of money. All the people who were involved are still alive and still, similar place career-wise. None of them became, like an A-list superstar that they can't afford anymore. So like they should be able to do it again. But it's very complicated, and it's totally out of my hands. It's just I hope that they come back around, but I never know if they're going to. So I'm kind of just proceeding as if that's never going to happen. I'm just concentrating on the books, and if someday they actually greenlight something, that'll change everything. But for now, I'm just kind of trying to keep my head down, stay on task.
I mean, anything can happen, right? The studio might be waiting to see the response of the final book.
Yeah.
I mean, we have Netflix now. They might decide to do some film series or even a TV series. Who knows? Anything can happen, right?
There's a lot. I mean, there's stuff kind of going on in the background. It's just always this little tease sort of dangling over my head, like, oh, we're having some meetings, and I'm like, oh my God, something's happening, and then I don't hear back, and it just, oh, we're having this other meeting, and we talked to this guy, and it's like, it's definitely not dead. I can say that much. Like there's never been a moment where they said, the time has passed. We're out of the warm bodies business. Like it's always been kind of, something's been active, and it's just never quite gotten to the point of like actually happening. So it's torture.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Continuing that, would you be interested in like a warm bodies TV series if that ever happens?
Absolutely.
With a new cast and everything, like a reboot.
Yeah, I mean, if they were to do a TV series, I still think it would be amazing if they could get the same cast back and actually just continue the movie, or maybe have like a recap of the movie and then continue on with the story. But even if it was a total reboot, I mean, in some ways, I think a TV series would be better as far as, artistically. It would allow them to do the story right in a way that the movie might not, because there's so much compression with movies. I mean, if in very highly unlikely scenario that they wanted to do like a trilogy of films, then they could actually do the story that I wrote. But like, there's no way, if they were to do one sequel movie, it would be very loosely based on the books, because the books get really big and like epic, and there's massive stuff happening, and they're traveling around the country, and like a lot of characters, and just there's no way they could squeeze anything resembling those books into an hour and a half of a low budget film. So it would be basically a total reimagining of the story using some elements of that. Whereas with a TV show, they can actually do that kind of the more nuanced stuff, like character development and the world building and stuff that that's usually the first to go when movie adaptations happen. They're like, okay, where's the action scenes and where are like the big set pieces, and then everything else gets cut, which is depressing, because movies have the budget for like the visuals and creating the big moments, but they don't have the time for the stuff that makes those moments mean anything. So they have to cut out, like when you watch the deleted scenes on a Blu-ray, it's almost always like the most interesting moments where like you find out, why the character did something, or like what their the whole reason for the story is always in those cut scenes, because they're just like, it's too slow. It slows the pacing down or whatever. Whereas TV, it goes on as long as it needs to, and they can kind of give a chance to get to know the characters and like make them feel more real. So it's more similar to a novel, I think, than a movie. A movie is like more like, I don't know, a short story, and a film series, particularly like a contained miniseries where they don't just drag it on forever. It can be a more natural pace for telling a novel, for translating a novel into screen, because it has the time for like that depth.
Yeah,
so I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, just imagine the Game of Thrones as a film series.
Yeah, exactly.
It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work.
Perfect example is the Dark Tower movie that came out, was last year or whatever.
Yeah, it didn't work.
Yeah, it tried to condense this incredibly complex, incredibly weird, interesting series into the most like just generic mainstream film they could, and it was just a horrifying atrocity, because it's like take the exact opposite thing, the exact opposite flavor that the books were, and just like it has to squeeze into this impossible shape. So that's I hate seeing that happen. And as much as, you know, movies are more profitable, they're more glamorous, there's more publicity, and just it's a much bigger deal when a movie happens. So like for me professionally, that would be way better. But as far as, you know, the story being told right, it could be better as a TV show. Just depends on how they approach it. So
yeah, let's see what happens, because I
yeah.
know that fans are waiting for something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question: what can readers expect from The Living? What can you tell us about the journey Art and Julie will go on?
Well, I guess there's two ways to answer that question. I mean, if you're actually if you've read the series thus far, you know where it left off. There's kind of a bunch of major events that just happened, and they're now going to be dealing with those. But I guess I have to kind of approach this as if people have not read Beyond Warm Bodies, because most people have not. And so I'm kind of would love to talk to the fans about what's going to happen next. I'm kind of in the position of having to talk from the perspective of like, you don't know who I am, and let me try to fill you in on what's been going on.
That was another question of mine. Like, can newer readers just like jump into The Living if they haven't like read the previous books or something?
Well, they can. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but I think the way I see this series, like Warm Bodies is fairly simple. Not a lot happens in Warm Bodies. It's not very plot heavy. There's basically just two major characters and some supporting cast, but like most of everything that happens is between these two characters, and it's very easy to summarize. And if you've seen the movie, you basically have the gist of it. So I would say, you know, anyone who's seen the movie of Warm Bodies could probably jump into The Burning World. There's also The New Hunger, which is kind of the prequel that sets the stage for what's happening. It actually introduces some of the characters that turn out to be very important. But it's also like it's a novella, you know. There's not much to it. So I think if you really want to just dive into it, you could definitely dive into The Burning World. That's kind of where like the new phase of this story kicks off. It introduces, you know, a lot of the new characters. Kind of the main antagonist is what comes into play here, and it's like it expands the world of the story pretty dramatically. I think to skip that one and jump straight into The Living would be pretty confusing, because it's a very much like picks up, you know, an hour later. It's like it's very continuous. It's not like, you know, previously a long time ago this happened and now something new is going to happen. It's very much like part one and part two. So I've actually written like a recap for each book in the series, and kind of for the series as a whole, in case someone just really doesn't want to spend the time to start at the beginning and they just want to see what all the fuss is about. I think I did a pretty good job of summarizing it in kind of that like previously on Warm Bodies sort of way. But of course, you know, as the author, I'm going to recommend you actually, you know, fill in the depth of the story. But, you know, you can take it as seriously as you want to, I guess. I think you would not be terribly lost if you read the recap. If you just jumped right into it without even the recap, then God help you.
Okay. So coming back to my previous question, like, what can you tell us about the journey that R and Julie will be going on?
Yeah, so I guess I kind of have to summarize it as a unit, as you know, The Burning World and The Living, because they're very dependent on each other. And basically, after the end of Warm Bodies, which most people who are probably going to be watching this interview are at least familiar with the premise of that. You know, they've seen the movie trailer. They know that it's about a zombie who is coming back to life, you know, through the power of love, or whatever you want to call it, however you want to reduce it. And so that ends with, you know, he is now kind of alive. He's at least has a heartbeat. He's, you know, becoming human again. And they've sort of started this cure that is, they don't really understand what it is or how it's happening, but the other zombies around them are also kind of regaining their humanity. And that's where Warm Bodies ends on a very ambiguous note. It's kind of like something's happening. We're not sure what it is. We're not sure how we did it or how we can, you know, continue it. But, you know, we're just getting started with this big challenge. And then it's basically, you know, a kind of a satisfying cliffhanger. And then, so Burning World picks up, you know, about 2 months later, and they're, R is, you know, alive technically, but he doesn't know who he is. He has no past. He's like just sort of a blank slate, trying to figure out, you know, what is how do I reintegrate into society, let alone navigate a relationship, a romantic relationship. And so there's all this stuff going on with him. He like all the other zombies are kind of remembering who they are. R is not, for whatever reason, and he's starting to realize like it's because I don't want to, because like my past self was not pretty and I don't want to know. I just want to be this guy with my girlfriend, and he doesn't want to like deal with who he used to be. But throughout the course of Burning World, the memories start to come back. He starts to figure out like who he is, and it's really a lot worse than he expected. I mean, it's worse than being a zombie. He was like a much more of a monster in like the societal sense. He helped cause a lot of the things that happened and was involved with a lot of the groups that kind of helped ruin the world. So like where Burning World ends kind of with him finally completing this memory. He knows who he is now, but he's the only one. He hasn't told anybody. And they have sort of gotten involved in this like sort of a rebellion against this group called the Axiom Group, which is like an old, kind of a remnant of the old society pre-apocalypse. Like it's a sort of a corporate military that has come back out of nowhere to try to like reestablish themselves basically as the new government. And they're kind of like, they're not just, you know, business. There's something creepy about them. They're like sort of something paranormal going on, but no one's really sure what they are, because they thought all these people were dead a long time ago. And it's a big mystery how this company came back. Yeah, so they're trying to figure out, you know, how can we stop this group from, you know, they've already taken over R and Julie's home. They've, you know, killed people that are important to them. They've like taken over what's left of the world. Burning World ends with them having, you know, they've just survived this disaster in New York. They're kind of decided like we have to stop this group. We have to shut down their you know, the technology that is preventing people from communicating. They have a jammer that sort of like has put the whole world into darkness. Basically, nobody can communicate, and no one knows, you know, what's going on outside their front door. And so they're trying to, you know, they have this vaguely defined mission of like, we have to figure out how to like reopen communication so we can reach out to the rest of the world, so we can find out what's going on and like, you know, help spread this cure, you know, share news and sort of restart civilization. And so they're going, it's basically a road trip. Like they're leaving the East Coast. They are sort of being hunted by the Axiom Group, which is moving all their forces back to, you know, the West Coast where their home is, and they're kind of trying to get back to the West Coast so they can stop them somehow. And they're kind of gathering allies along the way. But it's basically them in an RV driving through the desert, the wastelands of post-apocalyptic America, and trying to, you know, get there and figure out what's going to happen when they get there. But it's sort of complicated by the fact that they're all about to collapse themselves. They're all about, you know, on the edge of, the memories are coming back. They're realizing, you know, what people did. Some of them have you know, violence against each other in their past that's hidden, and so things start to blow up and fall apart, and they, you know, may not make it back to even fight that battle because they're so conflicted in themselves. So it's kind of like this big push to, you know, save the world, but before they can even try to do that, they have to figure out like, who are we, and are we going to kill each other before we even get there?
Okay, so any new characters we should know about?
Well, there's a lot of new characters in the Burning World. They're not new at this point. I don't think there's anybody new introduced in the Living, but it's in Burning World. Mainly there's a guy who is, you know, an employee of the Axiom Group, which is kind of the big bad, that joins them because he's realizing that this group is insane. Basically, they don't have no one knows where the orders are coming from. Their leaders are chaotic, and he's just disillusioned with the whole system. And so he's kind of going along with them, but he doesn't really believe in their cause. He's like, let's just get somewhere safe, you know, so I can protect my daughter. Basically, I don't care about like saving the world or reviving society or anything like that. And so he's kind of like on the edge. He doesn't like them. He's with them out of necessity. And then he has now just broken off from their group at the end of the burning world and is sort of out on his own trying to save his daughter. But it's, he's finding out that there's kind of more to life than that, because he's realizing, like, I'm alone out here and she's going to be alone, and the world that she's going to inherit is going to be a terrible place. So what am I really fighting for? So there's him, and then there's a little boy who is, who he is if you've read The New Hunger. He is a character who's very important to the main characters, but he's sort of in an altered state throughout these books, and he becomes more and more important throughout this. But it sort of alternates between R's point of view. There's chapters that are in first person that are R's life, like Warm Bodies is, and then it switches to this sort of omniscient narrator, which involves the other characters, and find out like where they're going and kind of what they're going through, and then switch back to R. So it gets a little more, it spreads out, but there's still a very central storyline where all these characters are interconnected. They're not like subplots. They're all, they go apart, they come back together, they have conflicts and reunite. But it's like, I always hesitate, like when I talk about like, oh, there's more characters. There's like, because I think of a lot of series, especially TV series, they'll just make filler. Basically, they'll introduce more and more characters, and suddenly like you're following the main character's friends, maid, dog's cousin, or whatever on their romantic side quest that has nothing to do with the main story. You're like, I don't care about this. What are we doing here? So I just want to make sure that's clear. Like, that's not what this is. Like, all these, they're all part of the main plot, even though they veer off here and there. It's like there's one story, and it is not about, some random character's love life. It's like, it's one story.
Okay, good to know that there isn't like filler in this book, like side quests no one cares about.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big problem with any serial storytelling that doesn't have an end in sight. Especially, it happens a lot with TV, because they don't have the end plan. It happens all the time because they're just going to milk it as long as they can. So like the whole trajectory is just keep making it until no one watches it anymore, no one reads it anymore, and so that's how you end up with just all this stuff that no one signed up for, and it's like, oh, let's fill some time. So I'm very conscious of avoiding that, even though as I introduce more threads and more characters, it's like, does this matter? Does this connect to the main theme and the main storyline? And if not, nobody cares. So
yeah. I mean, that's quite good thinking for an author, because I personally know some authors who like refuse to end the story. Like they refuse. They're like, people are still going to read it. I'm going to continue it. But yeah, at least it's good that you had an end in sight. Now, did you always like think of the series as a trilogy, or were you like that Warm Bodies is it? Like,
it was kind of somewhere in between, I would say. Like when I wrote Warm Bodies, I didn't think I would get the opportunity to write a series, because it was my first real attempt to get published. It was like basically my first serious novel, and it was a very goofy premise. I didn't even know if anyone was gonna, accept it as a story, because it's just like, it's pretty out there. And so I wasn't thinking like, I'm gonna come knock on the door of the industry with a 4-part saga about, zombie romance. It's just like, that's way too ambitious for the point I was at. So I didn't actually think that I would write 4 books, but I did have the story in my mind already. Like if you read the end of the book, it's very clear that there's a lot more that has not been figured out yet. Like it's very ambiguous, it's very open-ended. And in my mind, I had the general shape of what would come next. Like I knew, the biggest issue is R himself. He's alive, but who is he? He has to like become a person now. And that's not just about like getting a heartbeat. You have to like figure out, what's his identity? How does he interact with other people, and kind of like relearn humanity from scratch, which is very challenging, especially when humanity still thinks he's a monster and they're all very wary of him. Like, is he going to try to eat us? And it's a very complicated process for him to like figure out, how to be in society again. And then, the whole question of who is he going to turn out to be? You know, I doubt he's just some ordinary guy. There's hints throughout Warm Bodies that he had some kind of, you know, high profile, important job. He's wearing a suit and tie. He's like has memories of flying around the world, but he doesn't know what it was. And so like there's going to be some weirdness when he remembers like, oh, whatever I used to be, it's going to be complicated. And so I had kind of this general sense that he was some kind of powerful figure that, you know, from kind of a walk of life that he would no longer support. And that's sort of like his renewal, his second chance was this life. And then of course I knew that there was going to be, you know, backlash from the world at large. I mean, you have kind of the status quo has been disrupted. You have like one of the major threats, like the bony infestation, who are kind of controlling the zombies. They're suddenly like neutralized. What's going to happen? Like there's going to be a power vacuum. There's going to be groups that want to, you know, oh, we're safe now, so let's you know, restart government and law enforcement and whatever it is, and like bring it back to the old world. But you know, that's sort of this knee-jerk reaction is to like just fix it, put it back to how it was. But then there's going to be people who are like, but that's how we got here. You know, we can't just start over again, because that's, you know, this is our chance to try something new. And so there's going to be this inevitable conflict between, you know, people that want to go backward, want to go back to, you know, the old days, the old ways, and then people who want to progress and like try a different way of living. And so like I assume there's going to be some kind of, you know, giant force, a militia group, something. There's mentions of militia groups throughout Warm Bodies and The New Hunger, that there's kind of like this whole background scene that you don't really see much of in the books because it's happening elsewhere, but like the world is sort of run by violent men with guns, and they're those people are going to show up inevitably when you have a group that's trying to like de-escalate and trying to like, you know, be open-minded and peaceful towards people. Then the other kind of people are going to show up, be like, oh no, you don't. We're doing it our way. And so like I had the general picture of the story figured out, but it hadn't occurred to me that I could actually write that story until Warm Bodies took off. And I was like, you know what, maybe as weird as this is, as sort of unlikely of a vehicle as this is to tell this story, like it's there. And I think people want to know where it is going to go from there. So yeah, I decided, you know, fairly early in the process, the book hadn't been out very long. I think the movie was pretty new as well. But I decided then that I was going to do that. And then it was, you know, soon enough that I was even able to rewrite some things in Warm Bodies itself before it actually got printed, and put in a couple references to some ideas that I had later. So like technically it's not a retcon. Like it was there from the beginning. Barely made it in time before they went to the press.
So next question. Fans have been talking about the real world parallels related to Warm Body series for years now. Are you aware of that? And do you think certain things from the recent political landscape influenced your writing style when you were working on The Living?
Yeah, that's been really strange, because it's particularly because of the way this book has come out. People, you know, I actually had to put a author's note at the beginning of The Living because it's coming out, you know, now, but it was really written in 2015. So it was before most of this stuff had happened. I mean, like, I of course knew who Trump was, but like there was no election in process. Like a lot of the political drama that has happened after these books were done. And so it's been very surreal to like some of the stuff that I wrote that at the time I thought, you know, this is outlandish dystopian fantasy. Like it's just sort of me morbidly imagining where things could end up if we kind of keep following the patterns that I was aware of these patterns happening, but it was like it hadn't really gotten that dramatic yet. Things were just sort of, there was a sense of like maybe some bubbling momentum below the surface that hadn't really blown out yet. So that's what inspired the story. That's what I wrote based off that feeling that like we're heading down a bad path here. Like something is there's something in society, something just in human nature, something that there's these trends that are going to end up somewhere like this. So like the apocalypse in this story is not caused by like a single event. It's not like there was a virus or there was a meteor or whatever. Like there's a whole, section in the book describing how it's just this slow, boring process of one little thing at a time over the course of years of just society breaking down, civil wars between different factions of American culture. And then eventually, of course, environmental degradation, just all the things that were kind of in play taken to their extreme, and you end up with, the post-apocalyptic wasteland. And even before zombies arrived, like it was already the apocalypse. And then there's like, oh, now we have zombies on top of all this. So like zombies were just kind of the icing on the cake in this world. So there was a lot of kind of general stuff like that, but then there was, some very more specific things like, in this world, there's a border wall along Mexico. There's a wall along Canada, to keep Americans out of Canada. And like, the Axiom Group is basically a corporation run amok that's run by this like very sociopathic madman, and who basically sets himself up as the the new government. And I'm like, oh my God, this was not supposed to come true.
You predicted the future, kind of.
Yeah, and so it's gotten to in more and more detail. Like I just noticed on this last edit that I did, some stuff that I hadn't even picked up on, or maybe it even hadn't happened yet by the time that since my last draft. But then there's like a whole section about like this group separating families and locking kids up in cages. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so on the nose. It almost feels like wrong that it's so on the nose, like exploitative almost. But like I wrote it years ago. I'm not going to erase the story, right? Just because they made it happen. So I put a note in the book explaining like this is not meant to be like a political book. I didn't write this as like a satire of particular public figures. It wasn't like an anti-Trump book or something. It was about very broad themes that then very rapidly became real. And so I feel like I kind of have to comment like it's not as on the nose as it appears. You just have to think of this as like, I don't know, a reflection of what was going on at the time, and you can read it however you want now.
I mean, that's kind of smart that you let readers know that you wrote it in 2015.
Yeah, because it's pretty unusual that books are published, 3 years after they're finished. I mean, usually, especially with a already published author, usually it's like a year cycle. So most people are going to assume that that I just finished it.
I mean, they're probably going to assume that as well. So get ready on your Twitter mentions.
Yeah, exactly.
Get ready.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's next for you? Will you be trying something else, or will you be continuing with this Warm Body series as an author?
Warm Bodies is definitely over. I ended it in a way that basically makes it impossible to keep writing, not just with these characters, but like in this universe. There are like fundamental metaphysical things that make it very difficult to imagine future stories in that world without getting very weird. So like that story is done. It's possible that I'll write, random little vignettes or short stories about other characters, side timeline kind of thing. But as far as books, it's definitely over. It's been almost 10 years. I've poured my heart and soul into this, but I've definitely said what I had to say. And I'm very excited to like move on into non-series, non-genre things that don't have a bunch of baggage attached to them, that I can just write a single book and be like, you don't need a series recap. Just here's the book. You can like it or not. You don't need to explain myself. They're like, well, it's not really a typical zombie thing. Like it's not a horror novel. It's not gross. Like it's not this and not that. I'm very excited to just be like, it's just what it is. It's not, it's not fantasy. It's not young adult or whatever. It's just like, it's this story, and you can be interested or not. So I've got a lineup of books, of ideas for books that I'm preparing to dive into, but it's going to be a while before I actually get to start, because I've got, this book is coming out shortly, and I have a lot of work to do to actually like give it the parade that it deserves, because it's the end of 10 years of my life, and I'm not just going to toss it out there and abandon it. I've got a lot of promo to do. So my job for the foreseeable future is this, basically. I'm just going to be out here shilling for myself.
I mean, Warm Bodies, the idea behind it was very unique. Like nothing had been done like this before. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what you come up with next, like something unique or something. Yeah, let's see.
I
I'm
can assure
excited.
you it's going to be, none of it's going to have any big pop culture connotation. I'm not going to do like vampires or mummies next or anything. Like, it's just going to be something new. So.
Yeah, I mean, you predicted the future with The Living, so it might be something that predicts the future. What's going to happen to America like 5 or 6 years down
I
the
mean,
line?
I have to hope that, you know, that the bad things that I predicted aren't the only ones that come true. There's a lot of, you know, very hopeful things in this story that, you know, if I am predicting the future, I hope that's part of it.
Yeah, hopefully. So, last question. Any advice for aspiring writers out there? Because of your experience, because you have worked with both a traditional publisher and you are self-publishing The Living. So any advice, like what route do you think people should go for? Should they begin with self-publishing or should they get an agent or stuff like that?
You know, I have to get back to you on that because this is my first real experience with self-publishing in the modern era. And I don't really know yet how it's going to go. I think that, you know, if you have an offer on hand from, you know, a legitimate publisher, it's probably better if that's, you know, they're actually going to do something for you. Traditionally, I would always have said like self-publishing is a viable option, but like it's much more difficult, much more work involved, and there's just usually a cap on how far you can go with that, because it's very hard, if not impossible, to get books into bookstores when you're self-publishing. They usually just won't even talk to you. So if you don't already have kind of an established following, it's going to be hard to really like start that way. It'd be very slow, grassroots kind of thing. So like I would always say, you know, send out the query letters, start trying to get an agent, and then self-publish while at the same time. Like it can't hurt, really. Like that's how I did Warm Bodies. I printed a few hundred copies of it like at the moment that I finished writing it and started selling them on my website. But meanwhile, I was, you know, sending out those letters. So I think I would say try them both at the same time, and you can kind of see what happens, see which one, you know, takes off.
Yeah, that's good advice. Like also you are selling from your website, so why not go why not go for Amazon or
mainly because I mean the ebooks is on Amazon, but Amazon takes such a huge cut. Pretty much any retailer takes a vast cut of the profit, and at the scale that I'm operating from, I mean, like I'm hoping to sell 3,000 copies. So it's just it's basically like, do I want to make any money at this, or do I want to just kind of, I don't know, play the game and try to game the algorithm or whatever? And I may end up there eventually, but I decided for this first run anyway, because there already is a group of people who are like waiting for this book. I don't need to have Amazon push it for me. It's like I'm kind of selling directly to the fans for this first edition. I wanted to have like a real high quality hardcover book that they're all going to be signed and numbered, and it's going to be like kind of like a unique edition for the people who are actually, you know, still here. And then later, down the road, what's that?
I'm like kind of like a collectible as well, because the book will be numbered and it will have your sign. Yeah, it's a collectible.
It's simpler. Like I can keep everything in one place. I can have one link to show everyone. And granted, it's very limited. Like there's not going to be any major corporation behind me. You know, it's just me and my website. So there's only so far I can go with it. But it's for the first stage. It's just I wanted to just get it out there, and then we'll see what happens later. But for now, you know, it's just as easy to buy from my site as it is from Amazon, and you know, it comes signed, and maybe someday it'll be worth something. We'll see.
Who knows? Maybe.
I have to laugh at the thought, but yeah.
There's always hope, you know. Yeah. There's always hope. So, anything else you want to share that you want?
No, just my website is isaacmarion.com. Then all my books are available there. The Living is coming out November 13th, and of course, I'm on all the social networks if you want to follow me anywhere, Instagram, Twitter.
I link all of that. I'll link all of that when there's interview.
Cool.
Yeah, I've got you covered. I link all of that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, that's it then.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you.
Because I'm running late for getting a very large tattoo, and I'm nervous. So.
Okay, good luck with that, and thank you so much for the interview.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I'll send you a link when it gets published and stuff.
Okay, cool.
Okay,
Thanks.
Bye.